Welcome to this lunchtime reboot session. Um, I'm Magüi Moreno, and I will be talking about daily mindfulness practice that we can do in 10 minutes or less. So let's get started, because I would like to give a bit of time towards the end for questions or comments or anything we want to share about this. I don't intend for this to be a very theoretical class. It's not actually. It's essentially I'm giving you five concrete, specific mindfulness practices that we can all use during our day to day. But I am going to give you a little bit of a background about what mindfulness is and is not, for those of you who might not know much about it. Okay, so, and do let me know if you have any trouble seeing the slides. So, as I just said, I'm just going to give you a very, very, very simple definition for what mindfulness is, just so that we can have a framework of understanding about what I'm talking about. And I'm also going to give you a couple of ideas, a couple of pointers about why integrating mindfulness practices in our day-to-day as parents of kids with autism, autistic kids, helps us and also can help our interaction with our children. And then, as I said, I'm just going to give you five concrete, specific practices that you can try out. And I think what's really, really important is to stress right from the start that none of these practices require any of us to do anything we don't already do. Okay, so there's nothing new in what I'm going to suggest to you as a way of practicing mindfulness daily. And I think that's really important because, again, as parents, we've got enough on our plates. Okay, so let's start breathing. And here we go. This is actually the first mindfulness practice. I invite you, if you can, to place your feet on the ground. If you're sitting down, that's great. If you're not sitting down, that's fine. You can do this standing up. We breathe every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year we live. But the idea here is to just become aware of the sensation of breathing, right? So again, if it helps you to go inward and to connect with the sensation of your breath, you can close your eyes, or you can slightly kind of look down, sort of cast your eyes down a bit if you don't want to close your eyes. Closing your eyes is not necessary. If you are doing something else at the same time as listening to this, you probably do not want to close your eyes. So again, the idea is just to breathe. There's nothing to it. We do it all the time, but just become aware of the sensation. Where can you feel your breath going in through your nose and coming out through your mouth? Sometimes we feel it more at the throat. Sometimes we feel it more at the nostrils. Sometimes we feel it more as we feel our chest expanding. Sometimes we can feel it low in our belly. So as it kind of, again, inflates like a balloon and deflates. If you don't feel it very easily, that's okay as well. That's actually quite common. Many of us have very shallow breath where we don't actually breathe very deeply, and it becomes harder to actually sense it. So again, there's nothing to change. There's nothing to do specifically. The invitation is just to, whilst you're listening to my voice, pay attention to the sensations of breathing. And I'm going to invite you, before I continue with the slides, to acknowledge and be thankful for the time that you are giving yourself to listen to me and to explore some of these practices. Okay, so mindfulness is essentially about hitting the pause button and reconnecting to your body. So this is like a high level takeaway. I mean, mindfulness is more than that. I'm gonna talk about that in a minute, but in our day-to-day lives and as parents of neurodivergent and autistic kids, or whether they're little kids or not so little kids, we are often in a situation of rushing through the day because of our parenting challenges and because of life's challenges. We are all hyper connected through our devices. We are all overwhelmed. And I talked about mental overwhelm in our last monthly session. We are all trying to deal with environments at work, in our kids' school, sometimes with our own family members that are not always healthy or relaxing. So mindfulness is essentially the pause button. And it's not a very long, it doesn't have to be a very long pause. It can be just a few seconds, it can be a couple of minutes. But what's really, really important is that we do that. And why is it important? Because it allows us to reset, even if briefly, okay? It also allows us to reconnect to our body. A lot of us have this sense, I think a lot of us operate under the sensation that we're kind of like just talking and sort of moving heads, like there's nothing below our neck, but there's a whole body. And our body isn't just the taxi for the brain. We treat it as such, like, oh, it's the taxi for the brain. It takes, the body just takes my brain places. But our whole perception of life tends to be based very much around our thinking processes. That's why I mentioned that, we often treat our bodies like a taxi to our brains, or like a project. I need to lose weight, or my body needs to do this, or my body doesn't do this, and I'm angry at my body because it doesn't do this, or because my body is constantly asking me for food or whatever, right? So it's really, really, really important to reconnect to our body and to stop treating it like a thing, and mindfulness helps us do that as well. Okay, so that's the main takeaway. Mindfulness is like a pause, and it allows us to connect to our body. For those of you who don't know me, who haven't attended any of these sessions before, my name is Magüi Moreno. I am a mindfulness teacher and a parent coach, and I am also a mom to my son Adrian, who is 14 and has a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. And all my work is focused on us, the parents, the carers, and our well-being, because we do live with high levels of stress. This is something that has been well studied. And it obviously has an impact not just on our well-being, but also on our ability to connect to our loved ones, including our neurodivergent children. So mindfulness, in very simple terms, it's an intentional practice. So it's something that we do as a practice. And what does it mean that it's intentional? Well, initially, especially before it becomes a habit, we need to make an effort to do it. But the effort is not in the doing it. The effort is in remembering to do it, remembering to include mindfulness moments throughout our day. And at the beginning, it's an effort because clearly it's not something that we are used to doing. And therefore, before it becomes a habit, it requires us to be intentional about it. It's like, brushing our teeth. We have all forgotten the early days when our mothers needed to our mothers were our intention in brushing our teeth because they forced us to do it, our mothers or our fathers. But it's since become a habit, so we don't think about it anymore, brushing our teeth, I mean. So mindfulness, the idea being the more we practice it, the more it becomes a habit, and the less intentional and therefore effortful it needs to be. So in my life, because I've been doing it for many years, it's something that comes naturally to me, at certain points. I'm going to talk about that. And therefore, there's no effort involved. And what do I do when I'm being mindful? I am basically observing. I'm just taking note. I'm becoming aware of here and now. I'm becoming aware of thoughts that I have. I'm becoming aware of sensations in my body. I'm becoming aware of feelings that I might be experiencing. Maybe there are no feelings at this particular moment, but if there are, I become aware of them. And the key here is that we become aware without evaluating whatever we're becoming aware of. So if I look out the window and I see a beautiful bird, I'm going to think, oh, it's a beautiful bird. I'm evaluating, and that's fine. It's human nature to do that. If I look out the window and see some trash on my yard, I'm going to say to myself, oh, I need to pick that up. And again, that's normal. But with mindfulness, what we're doing is becoming aware, not just that we saw trash or a bird when we looked out the window, but that we also had a thought about that. It's as simple as that. And yet it's complicated because we tend to get lost in the thinking. So we follow that thought, oh, I need to pick the trash up. And then you start thinking about something else that you have to do. And then you start thinking about maybe your son or your daughter threw that trash yesterday, and why do they always do that? And blah, blah, blah. And then next thing you know, maybe it's been a couple of minutes and you've ended up thinking about something completely different. And you're no longer paying attention to looking out the window, okay? And this is what tends to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way the human brain works, okay? Mindfulness, again, is just trying to be present in this moment with what is without trying to change it. What it isn't, it's not a fad. I know it's become a bit of a buzzword now for many years, and that's great. It's great that more and more people know about it, that more and more people can practice it. But it is a kind of a practice that goes back thousands of years, and that science is now sort of catching up with it and saying, actually, yes, this works, and we can check that it works and that it has all these effects on the brain. So it's not a magical solution to life and life's problems and life's challenges. It's not a magical solution to our child's autism, not that there needs to be a solution, to any of the challenges that we live, because we have this parenting experience. It's not a solution to anything, because part of what mindfulness brings is also a different perspective on life's problems. We start seeing things as they are rather than as problems to fix, which is not to say that things cannot be improved and challenges don't need to be faced. Of course they do. It's not meditation. Mindfulness, let's say it's the informal version of meditating. Meditating is a much more formal practice where we set some time aside to sit in silence and normally observe and focus much more on observing the contents of our mind. So again, our thinking. Mindfulness is something that we can do throughout the day when we're doing other stuff, because it's not something we do. It's an attitude. It's a way of doing things, or a way of being present with whatever it is that we're doing. Okay, so mindfulness is something that we can do throughout the day, whatever it is that we're doing. Meditation is let's say a practice in and of itself that requires us to sit in silence. So it's slightly different, and it does not require us to like empty our minds of thinking or thoughts. That's pretty much impossible. Okay, that's just the mind creates thoughts, like the digestive system creates enzymes. It's automatic. There's no way that we can control our thoughts. There's no way that we can just have a blank mind. Okay, so don't think that this is what it's about, because a lot of people kind of get tripped over that. And mindfulness is not really useful unless we practice it. And this is why mindfulness has sometimes become a bit of a fad. People think, well, I'll just put the word mindfulness or something and suddenly it makes it all much more attractive. But actually, mindfulness is not really going to change anything unless you practice it, because it's not a theory. It's not, there's actually very little that you need to learn. There's actually nothing that you need to learn to practice mindfulness. You just need to have an understanding about what it actually means, and then you just have to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to see any difference. So let me give you two examples to just kind of ground us a bit more in the reality of what I'm talking about. So on the right hand side, there's a photo of someone doing the dishes, washing up. Okay, so you could do the dishes with mindfulness, and in that case, what it would feel like, it would look exactly the same, but it would feel like, well, you would be more aware of the temperature of the water. You would probably be more aware of any smells, the smell of the soap, of the detergent, the dishwashing liquid. You would be maybe aware of the bubbles, big bubbles, small bubbles, and the kind of iridescence of the bubbles, like how the light hits the bubbles and the colors that. You would be aware of the noise of the clanking of like the cutlery or the plates as you're washing them. You would be aware of the softness of the sponge. And you would also be aware of any other noises in the room, if you've got the TV on, if you've got the radio, or you're listening to a podcast or whatever, okay? You just become aware of your senses and your environment. And by doing that, what tends to happen is that the discursive mind, the blah, 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 blah mind, which is constantly on in our heads, would probably quieten down a bit. It wouldn't disappear because, as I just said, the mind will always be thinking. But you can have bubbles, actually, like spaces, moments when you're so focused on what your hands are doing and what your nose is smelling and what your ears are hearing that you are not lost in your train of thought. Okay. On the left-hand side is a photo of a young girl or a girl kind of shaking, and I wanted to convey kind of hand flapping or stimming. We can also be mindful not just with what we do, but also what our children do. So if your child is stimming, they're actually self-regulating their sensory input. And from your perspective, to be mindful in that situation means that you become aware not just of what your child is doing, but what you think about what your child is doing. So, and that will be completely context specific. If you're in a public place, if you're in a place where people are beginning to look at your child or at you or at you, then you might have thoughts about how your child shouldn't be doing that, or your child should be more discreet, or again, this is going to depend on what you know about stimming, what you know about your child's sensory profile. It's going to depend on the context you find yourself in, on the people around you. It's going to depend on whether you've had bad experiences before in these kinds of situations. It's just going to depend on a whole lot of things, okay? But what mindfulness gives you is the ability to observe your thoughts rather than to be lost in your thoughts or to believe the thoughts that you're having without being aware of them. Because if you're not aware of them, you can't question them, okay? So this is why it's important, and it can have a huge impact on how we connect to and think about our autistic children's behaviors and needs. So how does it help? What I just said, and pause, reset, and rest. It takes you out of your usual way of thinking, even if it's temporarily, even if it's very briefly. That allows you to have a bit of a reset, because it allows you to kind of like reconnect to what's going on around you and within you as it's happening, rather than from the point of view of what you're thinking about it. And then that can, and then it does have let's say a long-term rest effect, physiological rest, because it can lower your stress levels, and it can free you from this feeling of being a victim, or just being a victim of your own thoughts and emotions, or just, well, this is the way I think, this is what I feel. Yes, but by observing it, you can sometimes create a bit of a space in between what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what's happening. And so you can also begin to, again, question, do I need to think in these terms, or do I need to feel this way? And that might not necessarily change things at the beginning, but it does increase the space between a trigger and a response. Oftentimes there is no space because it's a trigger and a reaction. Something happens and immediately, automatically, you think something, you feel something, you do something, because again, it's a habit. That's the way that you react to certain things. With mindfulness, slowly over time, you get a bit more of a gap in between something happening and you reacting or responding to it. And actually, a response is different than a reaction, because a response implies choice. So what mindfulness can give you in the long term is a bit more choice about how you actually respond to a situation, whether that is a situation with you or a situation with your child or whatever. So let's get into the 5 practices that I'm going to give you. The first one is breathing in the bathroom. How many times do we go to the bathroom throughout the day? Many times. Okay, so again, this is not something that you need to do. You already do it. When you go to the bathroom, focus on your breathing. As you sit, focus on where you feel you're breathing most clearly. As I said at the beginning, it might be your nose or your nostrils, it might be the upper lip, it might be the throat, the back of the throat, it could be the chest, it could be your belly. And if you have difficulty feeling your breathing, then you can just breathe and say to yourself, I'm breathing. You don't have to count. You don't have to do anything fancy. You can count if you want, if that helps to keep track. You can count up to 10. What's important here is that you exhale through the mouth, because and you lengthen the exhale, because that activates the parasympathetic system, which is the kind of operating system within our nervous system that relaxes us, that sort of decreases our activation. And so again, going to the bathroom and breathing can be a bit of a reset. Okay. You can look through the window if you have a window, or you can close your eyes, or you can look around, so it doesn't have to just be breathing. You can also connect through other senses, trying to look for pleasurable kind of, input. And I think really the most important thing is, don't take your phone to the bathroom. Give yourself a break from your phone when you go to the bathroom. The 5 senses is another practice that is very simple, and it can be fun to do with kids, especially younger kids. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things that you can see in the space you're in, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, and you can switch it around. If it's easier for you to do the touch, you could do 4 things that you can touch outside of you, or the feeling of touch of the clothes that you're wearing. And again, you can do 4 things that you hear, or 3 things that you hear, depending on how noisy it is around you. 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. And if you're not eating, there's always a taste in our mouth. So that's it. That just puts you in touch with your senses. That is the same as putting you in touch with your body. And suddenly you realize, oh, okay. And again, what's very interesting, because human beings are mostly visual beings, when you start looking for things that you can see, you're likely to start judging. Oh, okay, I can see that my desk is a mess, that I need to tidy up, that the rug is dirty, that I need to hoover or vacuum, that I need to do this or I need to do that. If that happens and you lose track of the exercise, that's fine. Just eventually you'll notice that you completely lost track of the exercise and you went off on a tangent about all the things that you need to do to tidy up your room or the space you're in. Again, you don't judge it. You just realize that that's what you've done. And that maybe that's where your mind tends to go towards looking for things to do. Okay? We don't judge it. We just take note of it. Okay, third exercise, enjoy your drink or snack. So again, I am a tea drinker. I've got my tea here. So to make tea, but same thing to make coffee, you've got to boil the water, you've got to choose your tea bag, you've got to pour the water, you've got to let it steep, and then you've got to let it cool a little bit. Make it a Kit Kat moment, make it a break, make it a 3-minute break. And again, don't use your phone. Don't use your phone. Make that break about the looking, the feeling of the heat or the cold if you're drinking a cold drink and you're pouring ice, the sound of the ice pouring. You can use your eyes to look at the different colors. If it's a fizzy drink and it has a color, or if it's a tea and it's a red tea as opposed to a black tea or whatever. Or when you add the milk to the coffee and how it changes color, all of that, okay? And then just slow down. This applies equally to food. I'm not going to get into mindful eating, but it's the same process. We slow down and we just take it in through our senses, okay? And again, if looking at our kitchen, if we're at home, is gonna trigger us into thinking all the things that we need to do to tidy up the kitchen, don't look at the kitchen. Look outside and look out the window. Look at the trees, look at the birds, look at the traffic, look at whatever you have from your window. But again, what I would say with this can be adapted to a lot of things we do around food and drink. What I would say the two key indications here would be slow down and don't use your phone. Because when we're using our phone, we can be eating, and if we're using our phone as at the same time as we eat, which I know a lot of us do, sometimes I do it too, we don't even know what we're eating. Like we literally lose track of what we're eating. And then it's more common to overeat, to swallow a lot of air, and then to have really bad digestions and gas and all the rest of it. And we're just missing out on enjoying a food or a drink that if we're drinking or eating, it's because we like it. So just enjoy it. Slow down, don't take your phone, don't use your phone. Again, another thing that it's not a to-do, it's just something that we do, which chores or things around the house, whether it's more or little. Again, the issue here is we're not judging ourselves. We're not saying we should be doing more. We're just, whatever it is that we're doing, when we set the table, when we clear the table, when we load up the dishwasher, when we dust, if we dust, or do whatever. And this can also be applied, by the way, to hygiene. So like when we take a shower, or when we wash our face in the morning, or brush our teeth, or brush our hair, or put creams on, okay? So this actually, I could have used either example, but essentially, again, the idea is to do it slowly, to do it, and it doesn't have to be slow motion. We just don't want to be doing it in a rush, which is how we tend to do things that are very automatic. We do it on autopilot. We're not even aware that we're doing it as we're doing it, because our mind is somewhere else thinking about something else. So we do it slowly, we do it purposefully, we use our senses, and again, try to make it as sensorily pleasant as possible. So if we're having a shower, or if we're putting cream on our face, to do it nicely, to do it with a cream that we actually enjoy, that we like the smell, that, just to enjoy. There's a mistake here, because we're not talking about drinking and eating anymore. But basically, the idea is to make it as pleasant as possible for ourselves, even if we're not doing something that we consider in and of itself to be pleasant, like cleaning or wiping surfaces. to try to use products that smell nice, and to do it as if we were doing it for the first time. So this sense of I'm actually enjoying, putting cream on my hands or wiping the surface or whatever it is that we're doing. And again, here I would say don't multitask. It's very, 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 this is the problem is that we multitask now as a default. So if we're cleaning or if we're tidying up or if we're doing our morning routine, many of us have our AirPods on and we're listening to podcasts or we're doing other things. Something as passive as listening to a podcast might work for you. You might find that relaxing or interesting, and that's fine. But try not to do more than one thing at the same time. Because again, that just means that your brain's it's got too many windows open, okay? Our software is like, okay, too many windows open. And that means that we can't really focus on any of those windows, or we have less amount of operating system, memory for each of those tasks. And therefore we're going to enjoy them less. And finally, pause and stretch in between tasks, activities, events, things that happen throughout your day. So again, I'm not giving you anything else to do. You already have transition points throughout the day. So when I finish this webinar, I will probably get up from my chair and maybe go to the bathroom or maybe go downstairs and have some lunch. Whatever it is, that's a transition point. Okay, that is a time when one thing finishes and another thing comes next. In between that, I invite you to, first of all, realize that you are switching between tasks, because again, we go on autopilot throughout our day and we just go from one thing to the next, 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 until we finally collapse at the end of the day. And then we kind of wonder why sometimes it takes us so long to get to sleep. Our minds are buzzing because we've just been going throughout the day. So realize that you're switching tasks and pause. You just pause, and you can just, again, look out the window or take a sip of a drink, or you can breathe, do a few breaths, or you can stretch and move your body, which again helps us to connect to our body. And don't use your phone. Again, it's very, very hard because technology is addictive. It gives us little dopamine hits to check our notifications, to check our emails, to check our social media. And, our brain likes those little dopamine hits. But the problem with that is that, again, oftentimes we're like, oh, okay, well, I'm done with the webinar. I'm going to grab my phone. And then 25 minutes later, I realize that I'm already running late for something else I needed to do, or that I haven't had lunch. And now I'm going to have to eat in a rush before my next appointment. Okay, so when we are on our phones, we are not connected to our body. It's as simple as that. We're up here. We're not connected to our body. So that is all I wanted to give you today. I want to keep these very short and sweet. If you want to sign up to my newsletter, you can scan that little QR code and I will send you a free 4-part audio on self-care, which kind of looks a bit more deeply at why mindfulness can be really helpful to make us feel a little bit less rushed, overwhelmed, and emotionally, kind of operating on empty.